Let's just jump right into it. Today, we are unpacking a truly massive global market, and that is the $28 billion smartphone repair industry. Now, when you think about this, you might just picture a local neighborhood shop, right? Like a little 10 by 10 retail counter, maybe a guy with a few $20 screwdriver kits, swapping out cracked glass for $100 an hour. I mean, it sounds like a totally neat, straightforward side hustle. But as we're going to see in this explainer today, the underlying economics of this industry are incredibly complex, highly volatile, and honestly pretty fascinating.
To really wrap your head around the sheer scale of the demand we're talking about here, just look at this number. In the United States alone, consumers smash roughly 50 million smartphone screens every single year. I mean, let that sink in for a second. That translates to almost 2 screens breaking every single second. So literally, while I just said that sentence, a handful of phones just hit the pavement. 24/7, 365. For a retail business, this represents an endless, nonstop conveyor belt of desperate walk-in customers. You couldn't ask for a better baseline of demand.
But this brings us to the core paradox of our explainer today. On paper, independent repair shops capture nearly 40% of this global market volume, and they enjoy gross margins that often exceed 70%. That is huge! Yet, despite this infinite stream of guaranteed customers and these massive margins, nearly 40% of newly opened independent repair shops quietly go completely out of business within their first 24 months. So we really have to ask, how can a business with endless demand and sky-high gross margins see nearly half of its new owners go broke?
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the broken glass paradox, move into the $1,000 phone era, and look at the 3 ways to fix phones. Then, we'll uncover the silent profit killer, break down the actual startup costs and real returns, and finally, deliver the final verdict.
Starting off with Section 1, the broken glass paradox. Why guaranteed demand absolutely does not equal guaranteed survival.
The source material really hits the nail on the head here. It says, miss it and you will go bankrupt, owning one of the most high-margin, high-demand retail concepts in your city. Listen, simply swapping out cracked glass for $100 an hour is a really dangerous illusion if you don't understand the invisible mechanics of the trade. You have to understand exactly why this industry exists at such a massive scale right now if you want to see where the pitfalls actually lie.
Which brings us to Section 2, the $1,000 phone era. This is the big macroeconomic shift in consumer behavior.
So we have officially entered the era of the $1,300 flagship phone. Think back a bit. In the past, consumers generally upgraded their phones every 18 months. It was just a given. But as carriers fundamentally changed things and extended those device installment plans, consumer upgrade cycles stretched out significantly. Today, people are holding on to their devices for 3 to 4 years. So, when an $1,100 device shatters on the floor, buying a brand new one on the spot simply isn't an option for most household budgets anymore. And waiting 3 days for an official Apple or Samsung repair appointment? Yeah, that isn't really viable for most people either.
Because of those stretched upgrade cycles, the neighborhood repair shop steps in to fill a very critical void. But you really have to realize this one key thing. Independent shops aren't just selling technical labor. You are selling immediate risk mitigation and time. The customer isn't really paying for 20 minutes of a technician's time, right? They are paying to get their digital life, their work calendar, their 2-factor authentication, and their primary communication tool back online before their lunch break ends. That's the real product here.
Let's move to Section 3, 3 ways to fix phones. Because you really have to choose your operational model carefully.
You see, repair shop isn't just a monolith. There are 3 primary ways to build this business. First, you have the kiosk or micro-storefront. These are those really small setups you see in mall hallways or little strip centers that rely entirely on high foot traffic for basic screen and battery swaps. Second is the advanced micro-soldering and B2B facility. This is much more complex, handling intricate logic board repairs under microscopes. And third, you have the mobile repair unit. This is a van fleet model where the technician literally travels directly to the customer's home or office, which totally eliminates traditional commercial rent.
And this brilliantly illustrates the trade-offs, because every single model has a fatal bottleneck. If you run a kiosk, well, your low ticket size of around $70 to $120 means you survive purely on volume and foot traffic. Run an advanced shop, you can command massive tickets, $200 to $500, but your growth is heavily capped because finding master-level microsoldering talent is incredibly difficult. Go mobile? You get amazing margins with zero rent, sure, but your core constraint is time and capacity. Your technician ends up spending half their day steering at taillights in traffic instead of actually fixing phones.
All right, Section 4, the silent profit killer. This is the math crux of the entire repair business.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the metric that absolutely breaks businesses, the defect yield rate. See, major smartphone manufacturers heavily serialize their internal hardware now. They literally lock individual screens and batteries to specific logic boards using software. So if you try to use cheap aftermarket parts, it can trigger software warnings, disable Face ID, or just fail entirely after a routine OS update. This single metric, your defect and serialization yield rate, determines whether your shop thrives or bleeds out.
Let's make this real and walk through a highly specific scenario. Imagine a standard storefront doing 30 repairs a day at $100 a pop. That is $90,000 a month in top-line revenue. Not bad, right? Then you subtract your $25 average part cost, which leaves you with $67,500 in gross profit. Next, you subtract your $22,000 fixed baseline. That's your rent, your utilities, your point-of-sale software, and paying 2 full-time technicians. If every single part works perfectly, you walk away with $45,500 in net operating income before taxes. On paper, you look like a total genius.
But watch what happens in the real world when your defect rate creeps from a super manageable 2% up to just 10%, which is a very common reality if you're sourcing cheap parts. Suddenly, you have 3 furious customers returning to your store every single day. And the compounding loss is brutal. You lose the initial part cost, you have to buy a replacement part out of pocket, and your tech is now working for absolutely free to fix it a second time. That tiny 8% jump in defects, it quietly vaporizes over $9,000 in pure cash profit from your bottom line every single month, all while aggressively burning your local goodwill. Moving on to Section 5, Startup Costs and Real Returns. Let's look at what it actually takes to open the doors. You cannot just buy $20 screwdrivers and call it a day anymore. Opening a modern, professional layout in today's market requires real capital. Let's break it down. You're looking at roughly $18,000 for lease deposits and the physical build-out. Another $9,000 for precision equipment because you absolutely need ESD-safe workbenches and proper heat plates so you don't fry a customer's motherboard. You need $12,000 in fast-moving inventory, $6,000 for your POS systems and security cameras, $5,000 for local SEO and marketing to actually get people in the door, and crucially, a $20,000 working capital buffer just to float the business while you get started. All in, you're looking at a $70,000 investment just to turn the open sign on.
And look, beyond the cash outlay, there are severe existential risks to running this. Navigating right-to-repair legislation requires strict, ongoing legal compliance. If you accidentally buy stolen or gray market devices for parts, you are in major trouble. Or think about this. If you fail to safely handle and store swollen lithium-ion batteries according to strict municipal fire codes, you can face catastrophic fines or get shut down instantly. It's a real minefield.
So considering all that, what is the actual return on that $70,000 investment? Well, a struggling shop in a low-traffic area might only pull in $15,000 a month. That barely covers rent and maybe one technician, leaving the owner completely in the red. But a mature, prime suburban shop, they routinely generate $50,000 to $80,000 a month. How? Because smart owners use disciplined inventory control and aggressively push high-margin accessory sales. I'm talking about buying phone cases for $3 and selling them for $30. That specific strategy can yield a 15 to 25% net margin, which translates to an owner draw of up to $180,000 annually.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the final verdict. Is the juice really worth the squeeze?
So the crucial point is that it all comes down to how you choose to structure your risk. Path A is going with a major franchise like Fix. If you do that, you get immediate brand recognition and direct insurance leads, but you are going to bleed margin out to royalty fees and strict vendor pricing requirements. Path B is the completely independent route. You take on 100% of the branding and foot traffic risk entirely on your own shoulders, but you get to keep every single dollar of profit you generate.
To actually survive as an independent, you need a very specific psychological profile. This is emphatically not a business for passive investors who are just hoping to hire a teenager off Craigslist to run the counter while they sit on a beach somewhere. The margins are way too delicate for that. You need to be an operationally obsessive owner-operator. You have to treat inventory control like an absolute science, relentlessly oversee your part quality to keep that defect rate as close to zero as humanly possible, and above all, you have to view customer service as your ultimate competitive moat.
So, we have to end on this. Is fixing screens worth the risk, or is it just a very expensive way to go broke? The sources make it absolutely clear.
If you master the granular details, keep defects low, and maximize those high-margin accessory sales, you can build an absolute cash-generating machine. But if you ignore those tiny operational details, this massive industry will simply chew you up and spit you out. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and definitely keep these hidden economics in mind the next time you accidentally drop your phone.